This photo went around social media through the entire weekend, showing Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, being flown out by the US government. What happened really is that they flew in, they captured this guy in 𝗔𝗏𝗧, and Trump came out and said that they are going to take control in the country as well. They're going to run the country, and saying that very large US corporations will exploit the oil that is found in Venezuela. Venezuela is the largest oil reserve, has the largest oil reserves, over 300 billion barrels. And yes, it is about oil, but it's not just about oil. This move, being the capturing of Maduro by Trump and taking over the country and the oil reserves, is a massive move that can confirm a massive 2026 bull market and the way for the US to start cutting rates and print insane amount of money. In this video, I'm not going to talk about stuff that you already know because you've already seen that, but I'm going to give you a different angle that you might have not heard before. What's up, guys? My name is 𝗏𝗏, been here since 2016, and I'm doing these very short, actionable updates on the 𝗏𝗏 channel every single day. If this sounds good and you like the content, subscribe to the channel and come back for another one tomorrow as well. Let's jump in here. Very important. Let's talk about Venezuelan oil, right? So Venezuela is or has the largest oil reserves, 300 billion barrels, the largest across the globe actually, as you could have seen in this picture. But their oil reserves are not light oil as you could see in many of the other countries, but it is very heavy oil that requires very serious refineries. Very difficult to refine that oil and actually make it to use. But guess who has the largest refineries in the world that can make that happen? Well, yes, the United States of America. The 6 of the largest heavy crude oil refineries are in Texas and Louisiana, meaning the United States' capture of the country and the oil makes it super convenient for them to just simply use their own refineries and refine that heavy crude oil. You might be wondering, where did they get their crude oil before? Super interesting, from Venezuela. But since 2005, the actual import of crude oil from Venezuela diminished compared to Canada, which skyrocketed to 60%, meaning 60% of all the crude oil that the United States imports into the country is coming from Canada. Not only that, they also paid a massive premium for it. But now that they have the Venezuelan oil, they don't need to rely on Canada and they don't need to import crude oil from Canada, basically cutting Canada completely out. Now on the news, of course, US oil companies and oil stocks skyrocketed, which signals that there is going to be a very great business coming out of that for the United States. But it's not only the business for the United States, and it's not only cutting out Canada, it's showing an FU to the biggest competitors in the United States, being China and Russia. You see, Russia is the other country that holds large amounts of heavy crude oil. Also, 5% of China's crude oil imports are sourced from Venezuela. Now, it says 5% here, but we dig deeper in, and if you look at this article, it says that about half of Venezuela's crude oil exports, meaning half of all the crude oil that they take out of the country, has been going to China. That is a massive, massive feat, considering the fact that China will have to do deals with the United States now if they want to buy oil from Venezuela. Here's the kicker. Now, the US has the largest oil reserves out there. They're not going to be relying on OPEC, in Canada, in Saudi Arabia, Russia, China. They're just simply doing whatever they want to do, and they have the possibility to do a supply shock. Meaning, if Russia or China, or any other countries for that matter, want to screw around with the United States, the United States can just simply open the taps and create a supply shock that will take the prices of oil down and basically make these countries choke. You see, every single thing that you have on you, around you, is made of oil. Now, not directly from oil, but oil is a very important component in everything that we use today, including food production, transportation, any clothes that we wear, any items that we use. Everything has connection to oil. And if the United States controls majority of the oil supply, that means they can do what the fuck they want to do. And that is clearly visible as prices of natural gas, again talking about Russia, has been dropping massively since the news came out, and also oil prices are back at 2021 low. And now the big question is, how does this ignite the 2026 bull market? As you see Elon Musk saying, I had a lovely dinner last night with 𝗏𝗧 and 𝗏𝗏, which is obviously Trump and Melania, and 2026 is going to be amazing. Why? Why would 2026 be amazing now that the US basically kidnapped the leader of Venezuela? Well, it's super simple. There are multiple catalysts for a bull market rally, not just in crypto, but in general the financial markets for next year. We're talking about Trump calling for 1% interest. Jerome Powell is out of office in May, and there will be a very dovish Fed put together or a Fed chair put in place afterwards. Midterm elections are coming. Obviously, we know Trump and the ego is going to be there. He's going to make everything happen to pump the market. There will be quantitative easing. Quantitative tightening has ended, and there will be quantitative easing happening at a massive scale. But the main question really is, how can the US cut rates, or the main question was, how can the US cut rates if inflation is still ticking up and not drive the country into a recession? And now we got the answer. You see, very simply, if you look at this graph here, it very nicely explains how this capture of the Venezuelan oil will give the US the possibility to actually cut rates excessively, start printing money without wrecking the economy. One, as I said, massive supply shock. So now the US controls majority of the oil supply on the planet. Two, because of this, they have the possibility to crash oil prices, meaning they can just open the tap, create a supply shock, and push the price lower than $50. Now, if that happens, the US refineries would barely get by with $40, $50 per barrel, meaning they're not going to be extremely profitable, but they would not be making a minus, whereas China and Russia would be, and of course any other countries as well. Now, by pushing the price down of oil, that means that everything else is immediately collapsing as well. For example, CPI. Why? Because if everything is based around oil, again, transportation, your food, your clothes, your items, anything, if the prices of oil goes down, you can still have the same output for a cheaper cost. Therefore, inflation is not going to exist, and inflation is going to collapse. CPI is going to collapse. PPI is going to collapse. Now, if that happens, it's not just that the Fed can start cutting rates, but they have to start cutting rates. Why? Because we will see deflation happening. Now, inflation means that prices go up over a long period of time, and deflation means that prices go down in a long period of time. Meaning, if you're in a deflationary period, you can expect things to be cheaper next year. That puts danger into the economy because people will just hold off. If I know I can buy a new car next year for 5% cheaper, 10% cheaper, I might just save my cash and just wait out, then it goes into a big spiral. Therefore, deflation is much more dangerous to a country than inflation. That said, and aligned with all the catalysts, they will have to cut rates excessively, maybe even down to 1% as Trump proposed. And now they can do this without wrecking the economy. And of course, step number 5, these two elements, meaning cheap energy, talking about oil prices and then the result of that, and also talking about cheap money, excessive rate cuts, cheaper to borrow, therefore more people going to borrow to invest. That always is a great recipe for an incredible bull market. Now, of course, we can't compare this to the COVID crash of 2020, but if you look at the oil prices back in April 2020, when the whole COVID crash happened, prices went down, oil prices went down to $8 a barrel. Now, the same situation happened there where rates were basically slashed overnight to zero. It was very cheap to borrow because they wanted to boost the economy. If Trump wanted to do the same thing and start cutting rates excessively, he could easily push oil down to maybe $35, $30, whatever, $40. Even if they take a little bit of a loss, it would have tremendous amount of impact. Good for the US and bad for the rest of the world or the competitors. Now, whether it's going to happen now or not, we will yet to see. All this is theory. All I can tell you is that I'm going to be here every single day helping you navigate the market. If this sounds good and if you have enjoyed this content, subscribe to the channel. Come back every day for these 5 to 10 minute market updates, and also join in on the community. I have this completely free community on Telegram, link on the top of the description. Subscribe to the channel. You can do it here, and also come back for another one because I'm going to drop a whole 2026 outline, what the catalysts are, what I think is going to happen. It's going to be in here if you watch that a week later. So guys, truly appreciate every single one of you, and I'll see you tomorrow in the market update. Take care.